Let's go to the story that we brought you earlier on. U.S. President Joe Biden has announced over 12 billion rand in new funding for his presidential initiative for Democratic Renewal. This is in addition to a new set of policy initiatives intended to advance technology and bolstering democracies around the world. Biden is currently co-hosting the largely virtual Second Summit for Democracy. This year's gathering is being co-hosted by Costa Rica, the Netherlands, South Korea, and Zambia.
At the first Summit of Democracy, I launched a presidential initiative for Democratic Renewal, committed more than $400 million to shore up transparent and accountable governance, support for media freedom, to fighting international corruption, stand with democracy and democratic reformers, promote technology that advances democracy, defend elections. Now, working in close cooperation with the United States Congress, we plan to add another $690 million for new funding for the presidential initiative over the next 2 years. And over the course of 3 years, my administration intends to work with Congress to commit $9.5 billion across all our efforts to advance democracy around the world. We're all safer when that occurs. We're creating a new Bureau of Democracy and Human Rights and Governance at USAID to implement many of these funding commitments to enhance our support for democratic initiatives globally.
For more on this story now, we speak to our United States correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who joins us from New York. Sherwin, what are some of the key takeaways from the second iteration of President Biden's Summit for Democracy?
Bongewe, a broad effort here from the United States administration to really use their soft power as they seek to place human rights increasingly at the center of American international relations and foreign policy, and throwing a lot of money at the problem, certainly from their perspective, some $9.5 billion. That translates into a mammoth 171 billion rand over the next 3 years to deal with issues like advancing technology for democracy at home and abroad. The U.S. government, they say, is committed to advancing a positive version of the internet. He talked earlier in his remarks, did Biden, about the need to regulate, Bongewe, the use of commercial spyware and the need to shape emerging technologies like artificial intelligence so that they deliver and develop things that are in line with our values. He talked about promoting democratic renewal abroad, supporting free and independent media, fighting corruption, bolstering human rights and democratic defenders, but also talked about the need to advance democratic renewal in the United States, right? I mean, Biden took over after 4 years of Donald Trump, where we saw elements of authoritarian creep, certainly in how he ran that administration preceding Biden's ascent to the White House. This is additionally what Biden had to say, particularly as he seeks to place human rights at the center of his 4 years in the White House. Let's watch.
And as you can probably tell, strengthening democracy is a subject about which I'm somewhat passionate. I believe this is a defining challenge of our age. And today, we can say with pride that the democracies of the world are getting stronger, not weaker. Autocracies of the world are getting weaker, not stronger. That's a direct result of all of us coming together with confidence in ourselves and conviction in our cause. Governments from around the globe, representatives of civil society and business, democratic activists and trade unionists, people who refuse to stand silent at attempts to erode their rights. All of us are making the choice to be leaders of our world and what our world needs, to make democracy stronger, to keep the torch of liberty burning for ourselves and generations to come.
And many people will probably, disagree with that definition by the president. Certainly that authoritarian countries are getting weaker. That's certainly a point of debate, Bongewe.
It definitely is, showing, especially looking at what is currently happening in some of these parts. But there's a growing view, though, that these efforts have, in the short term, produced limited results. The University of Gothenburg's Varieties of Democracy Institute finding earlier this month that there are more closed autocracies than liberal democracies in the world. So what does this say, though, Sherwin, about efforts by the United States then?
Yeah, and I mean, in addition to the research done by the University of Gothenburg, one can just look out of the window, right? This is a feeling we have around, the incursions on democracy. You've seen what has happened in Eastern Europe. You've seen coups in places like Myanmar, in many countries in West Africa. And what they are saying, the research from the Gothenburg University, is that democratic decline has taken place globally. The report says that the world has not been more anti-democratic in some 35 years, and that 72% of the world's population, or some 5.7 billion people, live under authoritarian rule. And I think that feeds into what you're seeing now from this very forward-leaning approach from the United States. And one can see it in just how the U.S. is engaging in places like the African continent. If you just look at the number of high-profile cabinet officials that have visited, African countries in just the first 3 months of 2023. Antony Blinken was in Ethiopia and Niger earlier this month. Kamala Harris, the vice president, is just concluding a 3-country trip to Africa. Jill Biden, the first lady, was recently there. Linda Thomas-Greenfield, a cabinet-level U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, has just visited Kenya, Ghana, and Mozambique. Janet Yellen, the financial powerhouse of the U.S. cabinet, the Treasury Secretary, also spending 10 days in the region. And of course, President Biden himself saying that he wants to visit sub-Saharan Africa before the end of his term. So you're seeing this forward-leaning engagement from the United States, and it really does speak to this authoritarian creep, Bongiwe, that we are seeing around the world.
And definitely an interesting one to watch, Sherwin, especially a lot of people talking about even, the presence of, some of those in that particular summit and whether or not it will continue to yield results. As, President Biden saying that it looks like from his vantage point, rather, it is yielding the desired outcome. So let's continue then to monitor this. Thank you so much for your time. That was SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease.